Welcome back, everybody, to this final closing keynote. We have a very special speaker to close out this leadership summit on AI and machine learning and talent acquisition. And to introduce our speaker, I'm very pleased to introduce that dapper man down in the lower left-hand corner, the founder and CEO of HireClicks, one of our sponsors, Mr. Neil Costa. Neil, the floor is all yours.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to do an intro here, and it is such an exciting topic. So Peter and your team, thanks for all the effort to put together such great content for the talent acquisition industry. Certainly appreciate that. So I'm just going to do I have the humble, opportunity to introduce Dr. Savage, and I'll give you a little bit of background. But Dr. Saif Savage is the co-director of the Civic Innovation Lab at the National Autonomous University of Mexico and director of the Human-Computer Interaction Lab at West Virginia University. Her research involves the areas of crowdsourcing, social computing, and civic technology. For her research, Dr. Savage has been recognized as one of the 35 innovators under 35 by the MIT Technology Review. I remember when I was 35, Peter. I don't know about you, but everybody else out there. Good times, good times. Her work has been covered in the BBC and New York Times, and she frequently publishes at top-tier conferences. She's also received grants from the National Science Foundation, as well as funding from industry luminaries like Google, Amazon, and Facebook Research. Dr. Savage has opened the area of the HCI lab in West Virginia University and has advised governments in Latin America to adopt human-centered design and machine learning to deliver smarter, more effective services to citizens. Dr. Savage holds a bachelor's degree in computer engineering from UNAM and a PhD in computer science from the University of California at Santa Barbara. Dr. Savage has also been a visiting professor at the Human-Computer Interaction Institute at Carnegie Mellon University. So really excited to have you today and looking forward to it, Dr. Savage. The floor is yours.
Hi. Okay. I don't know why my camera. It says my camera stopped the video. Let me really quickly fix my camera. Oh, there we go. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you everyone for inviting me, and thank you very much, especially Peter Whittle. It's such an honor to be here at your conference. I have really been enjoying the summit. Super inspiring talks, and also very inspiring for my own research. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. So to start, and perfect here, and let me start this. So today okay, I don't know why, okay, well, it's presenting like this. Does this look good for you guys? Okay, so
it looks fine. It looks fine.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's begin. So today I will be presenting the AI that displaced workers, using the AI that displaced workers to power better futures. So a question I have been passionate about is thinking, well, how might we design AI for the future of work? AI on one hand has enabled these futuristic realities where we have voice assistants that can understand any type of question that we ask. We now also have autonomous vehicles that are driving us to places without needing to have any driver behind the scenes. AI is also creating millions of new jobs, as we recently saw within this talk. Some of these jobs have to do with having workers who are going to be labeling images. These images are then going to be fed into our machine learning models, and through this process, our machine learning models are going to better understand the world. So we might have, for instance, workers who are going to be labeling what is a road, what is not a road, and then through this process, our autonomous vehicles will be able to better understand and navigate the world around them. Through this process, other types of tasks that these types of workers who are working behind the scenes to power our AI algorithms do are, for instance, transcribing audio, or categorizing content. So workers might be transcribing the audio that Alexa, the virtual assistant Alexa receives, so that the machine can better understand what the end user is asking Alexa. We might also have, for instance, workers who are going to be categorizing the content that comes, for instance, at Google or Microsoft Bing, in order to say, you know what, this page is filled with hate speech. We shouldn't show it in the search results that users are going to see, or this page is filled with pedophilia. We need to call authorities and just try to get it down because it's a page that is engaging in criminality. And so workers are helping to label this type of content, and through this process, the end user obtains better services. We obtained virtual assistants who can understand anything that we're saying. We obtain search results that have minimum hate speech. Now, usually these workers that are operating behind the scenes are invisible to the end user. They're invisible to the customer using the services. Now, what is interesting is that it is expected that by 2027, almost 60% of the US workforce will be working on these types of digital labor platforms and doing a lot of these types of tasks that are going to be feeding into our machine learning algorithms to power better services. And so we've had, because of the growth in this area, we have had an explosion where a lot of research and a lot of resources has gone into thinking about, okay, so how might we use AI to make these workers more efficient, produce higher quality results? And through this process, we have been able to optimize what the labor that they're doing. And through this process, we have been able to obtain all of these really amazing services. So we could say, you know what? AI is good. AI is helping us to power these amazing realities where we have autonomous vehicles, we have voice assistants who can respond to anything that we ask. Yes, AI is good. AI is good, but one of the things that we also have to think about is that AI is also creating a new global underclass. So my research has also uncovered that AI is creating a reality where a lot of the workers who are behind the scenes labeling the images, helping to power these machine learning models, are many times earning less than minimum wage. And they're stuck in situations where they have very limited growth and very limited opportunities to transition into new types of jobs. And so this is why I have been very passionate about thinking, well, okay, so how might we design AI for the future of work? To design AI for good, we need to understand the experiences and values of all stakeholders. This is what I argue, that in order for us to actually design AI for good, we need to understand first the experiences and values of all stakeholders. So for this purpose, I use value-sensitive design. Value-sensitive design provides me with a framework through which I can go from, I'm going to understand workers, I'm going to understand the employers that are hiring these workers, I'm also going to understand the users and also even the platforms in which these workers are operating. And then, based on the understanding that I have of them, I'm going to create tools, these technical investigations. And then I'm going to see how my tools are used in the wild. And through this cycle, I'm going to be able to better understand my users, design better AI for them, because it's going to be able to cover the needs of all different stakeholders, especially the ones that have been left out, such as these invisible workers. And so in this talk today, I will be presenting about how we can use this type of framework of value-sensitive design in order to design for workers, and especially the workers who are operating behind the scenes, powering our AI algorithms. And so today we're going to see about designing AI for the invisible workers, who one of their complaints is that they're seen as these algorithms instead of being seen as humans. So to begin with, I conduct conceptual investigations. The conceptual investigations are based on doing a lot of prior research where I investigate what others have identified in the field. What are others saying about workers? What are they saying about employers? What are they saying about platforms? I also conduct quantitative research where I study in the wild how these different actors are interacting, and I also conduct interviews with them. Through this process, some of the things that I have identified is that invisible workers are earning less than minimum wage, but they value fair wages. And one of the problems that exist within this ecosystem is that they have very limited growth opportunities. However, what is important to also talk about is that I have identified that there are workers within these platforms that have been able to thrive and make good wages. Now, digital labor platforms, on the other hand, have aimed to, so these are the platforms that are posting the work that different workers have access to. These digital labor platforms aim to always have an available workforce, so that if a startup comes in and says, you know what, I want to add AI into my platform and I want to have humans in the loop to be helping, the digital labor platform wants any type of startup, any type of company to be able to easily come in and get work done, get workers who are going to be helping their machine learning models. And these digital labor platforms have also aimed to reduce of adding human workers into the AI, because since they want all of the different startups, all of the different companies to join them, what they have to do is they have to reduce the cost of integrating human workers. And unfortunately, this has been part of the reason why the wages have been very low. On the other hand, the companies, and this includes also academics, AI companies, for instance, as I mentioned, the startups, also large tech companies who are coming into these platforms to get work done, for instance, Uber, what they want is they also want to have an always available, low-cost, quality workforce to power their AI industry and their research. However, one of the things also to consider is that they lack the time and guidance on how to help workers. So it's not so much that they're evil, but rather that they just have difficulty navigating the space, and they might many times are not even aware about what workers need. Customers and end users are usually unaware about the workers behind the scenes. They're excited about the new AI that they have access to. So they're excited about being able to now use Alexa and have Alexa understand anything that they say. They're excited about getting really good search results with minimum hate speech and pedophilia. And many don't even know that there are workers behind the scenes. Now, government and civic organizations can also be supportive about everything, but many times they lack guidance about what are the best interventions that they can do. Many are not even aware about the experiences that workers have on these platforms. Many are not even aware that a lot of these workers are earning less than minimum wage. And so that becomes difficult because then they can't offer good assistance to workers. So after I conducted my conceptual investigations where I understood the different stakeholders, what I set off to do was to conduct the technical investigations. The technical investigations focused on, okay, you know what, let's now build tools given what we understand from the different stakeholders. So some of the takeaways is that I want to focus on designing AI tools that can help workers to receive respectful conditions. I want to focus on AI that helps improve the conditions that workers have. I want to design to enable workers' growth. And I also want to design to enable workers to be able to increase their wages. So I focus then on powering better conditions for workers. And within this space, I'm focused on increasing wages and also helping workers to grow their skills. I'm focused on this within this context because I argue that growth, if we're going to have even more workers on these digital platforms, it's going to be even more important that we do facilitate skill development. And we also have to think about ways in which we can increase their wages, given that workers are going to be, a lot of workers are going to be now on these platforms making a living full time. So therefore, I now ask, okay, so how can we design for skill growth and wage increase for invisible workers? Some considerations are that some invisible workers have been able to thrive on these digital labor platforms. And so given that we know that some workers have been able to thrive, I propose the following architecture. Okay, we're going to identify the workers who have been able to thrive. Next, we're going to assume that these workers are going to be our coaches, and they're going to share strategies about how others could also be able to thrive on these digital labor platforms. Now, once we have the strategies, we're going to ask workers, the other workers, the novice workers, to follow those strategies so that they can also increase their wages and improve their labor conditions overall. However, one of the things to notice is that perhaps not all of the strategies that these workers are sharing are actually good. It might also be that for novices, some of the strategies might not work. For instance, they might just not have the skills to be able to execute some of the strategies. And so they might be irrelevant for more novice workers. So what I do is that I integrate AI here. I assume that we're going to have an intelligent agent that it's going to recommend strategies. Workers are going to receive the strategy, and then they're going to provide feedback about whether or not they thought the strategy was useful or whether or not they felt the strategy didn't work. And this is going to be the reward that they're going to give back to the virtual agent. And through this process, this is something that is called reinforcement learning. Through this process, we're going to learn what are the best strategies so that workers can increase their skills and also improve their wages. Now, once I had my AI platform, I then started to think about, okay, so I have my AI tool. What is the best way in which I should implement the system? One of the things that I could do is that I could very well create a new labor platform where I put inside my labor platform this AI so that workers, when they're working on my platform, they're able to develop their skills that they want and increase their wages. I have complete control over how I'm helping workers. That's great. I could very easily create this new AI labor platform that is focused on helping workers. The problem is that it's pretty hard to recruit people into any new platform. Think about, for instance, Google Wave. It's going to be very hard probably to recruit employers to be posting jobs on this new labor platform. And this will mean all of the time that I'm investing in getting employers to join the platform, getting workers to join, is time that I am not focused on studying skill growth and work increase. I'm not going to be able to rapidly test out whether or not my tool works. And so I propose to work with an existing digital labor platforms, the ones that are used by large technology companies, such as Google, Amazon, Microsoft. And what I do is that I repurpose these digital labor platforms so that they're focused on AI for good, so that they're focused on helping workers. For this purpose, what I do is that I create web plugins. Web plugins allow me to repurpose existing labor platforms so that they can guide workers to succeed using AI techniques. So this is an example about how one of these digital labor platforms looks like. This digital labor platform basically tells workers, okay, you know what, this is the task that you have to do. This is how much you're going to receive for doing the task. Here, for instance, a worker needs to transcribe a letter. They're receiving an image of a letter and they need to input the information. This, for instance, might be something that is fed into a virtual assistant that a blind person uses so that their virtual assistant can tell them the type of letter that they just received. Oh, sorry. Let me. Sorry. And so this is overall how this type of platform looks like. Now, what I do is that I input into this platform my interfaces. My interface looks something like this. Here, I created a web plugin. My web plugin is inserted on top of the digital labor platform that workers are already in. And what I do is that my web plugin allows me to have workers now focus, for instance, on coaching others. So here workers can share their advice about how they want to coach others. And then within this platform, I'm also going to show workers the advice that others are giving them. And then behind the scenes, I have my AI algorithm that is learning what type of advice should be shown to workers. And so this is overall how my interface looks like. So again, in the back end is the digital labor platform that workers are accustomed to being on. And my plugin allows workers to be able to directly be able to share advice to other workers without leaving the platform, and also see advice that other workers are giving them so that they can develop their skills and earn higher wages. And so this is overall my tool, which in this case, I don't have to create my own digital labor platform, but instead I'm working directly on existing digital labor platforms. And so now I have overall done my conceptual investigations. I understood who were the stakeholders, what was going on with them. Then I have created my tool. And the next step that I'm going to do is I'm going to do my empirical investigation, which is I'm going to study how do workers engage with my tool? Does my tool work? And so through this cycle that value-sensitive design provides us, I'm able to better understand the stakeholders and design better technology for them. And so now let's focus on our empirical investigation. Within my empirical investigation, I'm interested in studying my tool. First of all, does my tool work? Does my tool help workers to develop their skills? Does it help workers to increase their wages? And then I'm interested in understanding how is my tool used in the real world? So the first thing that I study is, does my tool help workers to develop their skills? For this purpose, I conducted a field experiment. Within the field experiment, I had 90 workers. I divided them into 3 conditions. And I had them conduct one of the most popular tasks on these digital labor platforms, which is, for instance, audio transcription. And then what I do is that I have them within these 3 conditions. And then I'm going to study whether or not workers become faster and better at their job, which relates to skill development. And so within the 3 conditions that I study is 1, control, where workers are going to be providing advice, or are going to be receiving, they're going to be doing the audio transcription tasks without receiving any type of advice. Random is just random advice that's going to be taken out of the pool of advice that other workers provided. And then my crowd coach condition, in which I use AI-based advice, where my AI is identifying what advice is the best one that we should give to workers. And so here are the results from my study. This x-axis is showing the different tasks that I had workers do. The bars are color-coded based on the condition, for instance, if they're control, random, or crowd coach. And the y-axis in this case is showing the completion time. Overall, what I found was that workers using my crowd coach did become significantly faster at completing tasks. Here is, again, we see the different tasks that workers did. And then in the y-axis, I have whether or not how accurate they were in completing the task. And overall, what I found was that workers who used Crowd Coach were able to maintain their work quality. This is, they were able to maintain their accuracy. And so overall, what we're seeing is that we're able to get workers to become faster at their job without them losing any quality. Next, I wanted to see, okay, so I'm able to help workers start to develop their skills because they're becoming faster at their job while maintaining their quality. I want to see now, well, does my tool help workers to increase their wages? And so what I did was that I recruited now 100 novice workers who were earning similar wages. And I divided them into 2 conditions. And I studied workers for 2 weeks. Control condition, they're not receiving any advice. And the crowd coach condition, they're receiving AI-based coaching. And overall, what I found was that workers who were using Crowd Coach were also able to increase their wages. So this graph shows my control condition versus my Crowd Coach condition. The y-axis shows their hourly wage that workers were able to obtain. And overall, what I found was that workers using my tool were able to increase their wages. And so once I saw that, okay, my tool is helping workers to start to develop their skills and start to increase their wages, well, how exactly is my tool used in the wild? For this purpose, I, again, recruited workers. I recruited around 179 workers and just had them use my tools for any type of task that they wanted. And here what I wanted to study was, it wasn't clear to me whether workers would use my tool for certain types of tasks, whether it would be adopted for all types of tasks, whether they would even use the tool. And so this is why I was interested in understanding how the tool was used in the real world. And overall, what I found here, what we're seeing is each of these circles represents a type of task that is available on these digital labor platforms. The size of the circle denotes how positive the advice workers found the advice. And so circles that are bigger means that workers found the advice that was generated for those types of tasks more positive than, for instance, tasks that have a smaller size circle. The x-axis is showing the number of workers who signed up to become coaches and who started giving advice to others around the task. The y-axis denotes the amount of advice that they gave other workers. And so one of the takeaways that we find from this one is that for all types of tasks that were available on the digital labor platform, workers signed up to coach each other. And so that's a good thing because it means that workers found the tool was useful for all types of tasks. It wasn't just one particular type of task in which they flocked to, but rather all types of tasks. Now, what is also true is that for some tasks, workers focused all of their energy in providing a lot of advice. For instance, for this one, which is the surveys, workers provided a lot of advice about how other workers could become more effective and increase their wages while doing surveys. And we also see that the size of the circle denotes that workers found the advice useful. And so even though a lot of them were actively participating in this type of activity, they found what others were saying to them useful. However, we do find that there are some cases where for some task workers were really eager to help others. They shared their advice. But while workers looked at the advice, they just thought that advice wasn't actually as useful for them. For instance, that was the case of the audio transcription, where you had a lot of coaches signing up. They provided a lot of coaching snippets, but workers didn't find the advice as useful. However, what is interesting is that overall, the median score that workers provided for each of the different advices was always in general positive. So we didn't have any negative scores because that could have happened as well, since we had the thumbs down option. And so in general, workers found this type of advice useful for them. And so overall, what we're finding is that this type of tool did help workers to start to develop their skills, start to increase their wages, and could be used also in a wide variety of real-world tasks by a number of different workers. And so I think that there's the opportunity to explore more sophisticated AI models that can help workers to develop their skills while increase their wages. I'm also interested in studying platforms that can help workers to develop their skills and increase their wages while they're engaged in more sophisticated types of tasks. For instance, identify ways for workers to improve labeling activities in videos while empowering them to access work from higher paying companies. Other types of research opportunities that I'm interested in is studying how this type of tools could better integrate workers' values, domain information, and culture. I also think that it would be very interesting to study how this type of tool could be used within other digital labor platforms, for instance, on Uber, Upwork, TaskRabbit. I'm also interested in studying how we could study this within more specialized jobs, for instance, business, even healthcare. I'm also interested in studying how this type of tool could facilitate career advancement, for instance, helping workers to transition to new types of jobs and perhaps even transition to new types of platforms. So overall, what we're seeing is that we can use AI to help invisible workers develop their skills and also increase their wages. So I think that when we're thinking about designing AI for good, one of the things to consider is that we should be able to empower workers to create to create the change themselves. So when I was designing Crowd Coach, it wasn't that we were telling workers what to do, but rather we had identified the workers who were successful and we were empowering them to better help the other workers. And so I think that there's a lot of value in thinking about how we can empower workers to drive change themselves. Now, within my studies, I have also been studying, well, how can we get out these tools in the real world? And for this purpose, I have been teaming up with different governments, as well as different industry actors that work within local regions, for instance, local West Virginia, as well as companies that are more international, for instance, Microsoft. And so here, for approaching this, I adopt, again, value-sensitive design. My value-sensitive design allows me to go from, I'm going to understand the different actors, for instance, the companies, the governments, and then from that, I'm designing technology. I'm studying how my technology is deployed in the wild, and through this cycle, I'm able to advance. And so I have been working with Mexico's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and together we have been designing better technology for workers in rural Mexico and different parts of Latin America, so that we can empower them to start to develop their skills. I've also teamed up with the local government of West Virginia, and here also this is funded by the National Science Foundation to study these types of tools within the setting of rural America. One of the things that here what we're doing is, even in very distressed parts of West Virginia, public libraries exist. And so what we are doing is that we are working with public libraries, and we got this collaboration through the collaboration with West Virginia's Department of Commerce, so that the public library can give us access to their infrastructure. And through this access to their infrastructure, we're able to create a synergy where rural workers can come on into the library and find a space where they can develop their skills. And so what we're doing at West Virginia is that we're helping workers who many times they don't have access to internet at home, but at the public library, they do have a space where they're going to be able to access good internet and start to be able to develop their skills so that they can now access new types of jobs. West Virginia, for instance, has a lot of displaced workers from the mining industry. And so through this process, our goal is to help them to start to develop their skills. And I'm very interested in collaborating in this space if others are interested in. And we are also teaming up with local companies, as well as we have been teaming up as well with Microsoft to understand how are international companies looking at this problem, and how can we better help these different stakeholders to collaborate with each other to develop skill development, especially within rural regions, which are many times forgotten. So overall, I want to say that when we're thinking about AI for the future of work, it is crucial to understand the experiences and values of all stakeholders involved. AI for the future of work is about empowering workers to create change themselves. I think that there's a lot of value in thinking how we can empower workers so that they are the ones who are driving the change. And AI is becoming a tool that is fueling them to be able to achieve their different goals. And so this is a tool that an organization that has been coming together, which is called Turcopticon, where workers are actually coming together to create their own tools so that they can empower themselves. In case you're interested in learning more about this workers, I would invite you to check out their tool. I think it can be very interesting, and it also provides support if you're further interested in them. But this type of tool is just workers coming together and uniting to help each other. And well, special thanks to all of my collaborators, my amazing PhD students, and also, of course, our funding from NSF and different industry actors who have powered us. And so this is my contact information. Thank you again very much for inviting me to this talk. Thank you so much, Peter, for this amazing opportunity and invitation. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Saif, that was wonderful. And we do have a couple of questions. I think you've opened our eyes to, as I think you said at the outset, a situation most of us are not aware of, this invisible workforce. And you did talk about your collaboration in Mexico, but do you have any sense of the demographics of that workforce? I mean, are we talking about, or have you seen any differences in the skill pickup among U.S. workers, for example, invisible workers versus those in Mexico or Europe?
Yeah. So recently, where I have been studying a lot. That's a great question. Where I have been studying a lot of these invisible workers is primarily on the platform called Amazon Mechanical Turk. Amazon Mechanical Turk, to drive more the quality. They have been more focused on the US because what they have found was that a lot of their tasks involve English, for instance, English transcriptions, etc. And so they have recently closed a lot to international workers, and they're more focused within the US. Before they had, for instance, a lot of Indian workers, and they have also been reducing the type of the Indian workers that they allow on their platform, and it is very heavily US based. And within the US, we have also studied what are the differences between urban and rural areas. For rural areas, these types of platforms are actually a great opportunity because they're providing new jobs that workers in this region did not have access to. And because they're providing them with these online jobs, workers no longer have to leave their hometowns, which for many in West Virginia, they were turning into ghost towns. And so that's great news for a lot of these regions. In urban areas, what we're finding is that workers have to deal a lot of the times with multiple jobs because these platforms do not pay very well. And so you have workers who are juggling multiple jobs in order to survive. In rural areas, many times they can be very much just focused on this platform because what they're earning on that platform is enough for their lifestyle in the rural area.
If you looked at one of your graphs, and I also read your interview with MIT Technology Review, the polite way to say it is they aren't earning the minimum wage. The other way to say it is they're earning $2 an hour, which is, terrible. You were able to, if I understood the graph correctly, you were able to almost double that, but still not even close to an earning wage. Now, on the one hand, you could say, well, they're gig workers and that's the way gig work works. On the other hand, it raises another issue. And we have a question here. I inadvertently usurped the first half of your question, but I want to read the whole question so you can get the second half, which does talk to this issue of the ethics of what's going on these platforms. She says, thanks for sharing your work, Saif. Has your study focused on digital workers in the United States or workers on an international scale? We just covered that. Then she goes on to say, also, beyond advocating for fair wages, how do you account for the ethics of work in some of these digital labor jobs like click farms when designing AI for good slant the future of work?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I have thought about is possibly creating labels to the type of labor that is produced on these digital platforms. So for instance, many times within food, we have labels about, yeah, this food was brought to you through fair trade, fair labor conditions. And we could potentially ask these digital labor platforms to have similar labeling for the AI that is given to us. So maybe we can ensure in that way that, okay, your virtual assistant that is telling you a lot of the information, you know that the workers who are behind it are doing tasks that are not overly, because workers many times are also exposed to very difficult labor conditions as well. And so that way we could maybe have labels where the end customer is made more aware about which platforms are treating workers fairly, not only in terms of wages, but also in terms of the type of work that they are exposing workers to. Another thing I think to consider is also how do you change the mentality of even the end user and employers themselves. And so here we have also been designing so that the employer and the customer is fairer to workers. Because, for instance, many times the customer is unfair to the worker, to workers on these digital labor platforms. For instance, a lot of people, Uber drivers, they receive unfair reviews all of the time. And the problem is that one unfair review can terminate them from the platform. So for instance, you can have customers who are complaining about how an Uber driver maybe got stuck in traffic. That was something that the driver could not control at all. They don't control traffic, and yet if an Uber driver gets many bad reviews, they can be completely terminated. And so I think it's also helping employers and customers to realize when they might be unfair with workers.
Okay, one more question. Can you talk a bit more about how you are involving public libraries with AI's invisible workforce? And is that something that you think can roll out across the country?
Yeah, so what we're doing at West Virginia, and right now we're basically starting with one public library, and it has been hard because of the pandemic. But what we're doing there is that we're working with that public library to give first courses to the workers in that region. And so on one hand, we have been going into the public library every weekend to allow any worker who wants to jump into our digital work course to be able to start to develop their skills. And so we're teaching them things like, for instance, even how to write an email, how to use, how to copy and paste. Because, I mean, for us, it might be like, oh, that's an obvious skill. That is a barrier that exists in several of these rural regions. And so we're tailoring the courses based on the needs that rural adults have, rural adults in that region have, and also employers. What are employers asking them for? And so here, that's why we've also had conversations with employers to understand what type of skills are they requesting from workers, so that we can design our courses for them. And we are now developing a plugin so that we can teach workers how to better use Microsoft Word. The problem is that, for instance, Microsoft has developed tools and tutorials. A lot of these tools and tutorials are not focused at all for rural adults. And so we're very much tailoring this tool to help rural adults use our plugin to develop their skills. And public libraries, what they offer is that they enable people from these regions who might not have access to fast internet now to be able to have fast access, and the public libraries are very much well situated so that it's within driving distance from all of the rural adults who are in the region. And so that's right now what we're doing in this program. I hope this answered the question, but we're starting out right now small to understand in detail the needs, and then we're expanding more. One of the things that we also did was that we teamed up with a community center, and within this community center, we opened up something that's called a help desk. This help desk is this is in rural Pennsylvania, and this help desk, what it allows is that anybody can come on in and ask their tech questions that they might have. And so what we're seeing is that by providing this type of tech help desk, we're facilitating that rural adults can start to think about technology more, because one of the barriers that we also saw was that they have sometimes mental models about what they can or cannot do. And for instance, being tech savvy is something that they don't envision themselves being part of. And so through these types of interventions, we're helping them to see that, no, you know what, you can also be involved in tech.
Wow, that's great. That's terrific. Well, listen, this has been a fascinating presentation. Thank you very much for closing out our conference today. It was a fitting end to a very important event. We were delighted to have you here, and would welcome you back to any of our future events.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed being here. Thank you everyone for attending my talk, and fantastic questions also.